Welcome to Live DAF, your online DAF Yomi Shir.
Shalom Aleichem, and welcome back to today's DAF Hayomi Maseches KIDDUSHIN DAF Memvav. We got up to the third line off the top of the Amud Itmar. This is a continuation of yesterday's discussion. We have a Ketana, under 12 years old. She went off and got engaged without her father's approval. So we're waiting to see whether he's going to approve or disapprove. What happens in the interim? In the meantime, says Rav, both she or her father can turn down the offer, can reject this Kiddushin. Amar Rav Beinhi. So despite the fact that she herself initiated this process, she can turn around and cancel a deal, since her father has not yet approved. It's like a Kiddushin which is pending. So, notwithstanding the fact that she herself participated in the Kiddushin, she knowingly got involved in this Kiddushin, she can turn back and cancel. Bein hi u bein havia yichaylin la'akiv. That's Rav's Chiddush. Rav Asi disagrees. Her father can turn it down, but she can't, because she had already given her approval. Rav Asi Amar. Avia, yeah, he can reject it. Velohi, but she cannot. Eisvei, Rav Huna, he has a kasha Rav Asi, who says that she cannot. Va'amrilo, some say it was chiyah. Rav Rav Asi, it's a kasha from a pasuk which discusses a mefat, a fellow who convinced an isha to be with him as married. So he has to has to pay a penalty unless he stays on and marries her. But of course, both the woman and her father, we're speaking about a young woman, they can both, either or, can reject this fellow. And the pasuk says so. Yema'in avia. So the father will turn him down. Why the double expression ma'in yema'in? It's going to include something. Ainli ella avia. Perhaps only father can do so. He atzma menayin. What if she herself rejects this fellow? Talmud Loima. The answer is yes, she can do so. Im ma'in yema'in mikol makayim. So this repetition tells you that whether it's father, whether it's the daughter, they can both refuse to marry the mafata, and he has to pay the penalty, the knas, instead. Bottom line, despite the fact that this fellow, and Rashi explains, the Gemara at this point was speaking that this fellow was mafata her for the sake of Kiddushin. So she went along with it, willingly went along with it. Still, pasuk indicates to us that not only does father have the ability to reject this fellow, even she herself can be memayin. That's right against Rav Ashi, who says that she no longer has that opportunity. Amahu Rav, so Rav, who was actually the Bar Plukta, the one that was disagreeing with Rav Asi, came around and defended Rav Asi. That's the way of the Chachamim throughout everywhere in Torah. They'll argue, they'll debate, but ultimately they're on the same side. So Rav turned around to the questioners. Why are you attacking Rav Asi? Like says if you don't follow something which can be flipped around, you're turning around you're assuming things. You're assuming that the mafate was with her with Kiddushin in mind, that there was a masa Kiddushin. No, who says? And that's the basis for your kasha on Rav Asi. He can easily respond to you. Rav Asi will learn the parsha mafata, the Torah, does not entail a masa Kiddushin. He did this pita. He was with her as married, but not for the sake. There was no real formal Kiddushin. In which case, it's not relevant to our discussion, right? Which discusses a case of real Kiddushin. Well, shaloi l'shem ishus krabbai. Well, if it's really not involving Kiddushin, there was no element of ishus by the mafata. Why would we need a pasuk to tell you that father or daughter can reject this fellow? Of course, that experience was not a Kiddushin experience. Amar of Nachman bar Yitzchak. The Chiddush is like this. Of course, you can just walk off and ignore this fellow. There's no formal interaction. And the chiddush of the pasuk is that he will have to pay for it. Right? As we just explained, if there is a rejection, if they turn him down, he has to pay a knas. And the chiddush is that irrespective of who turns him down, father or her, loy mashem mishalim knas k'mafut, he has to pay up. Right? Don't think that only the father can bring about that payment. Even if she refuses to marry him, it also has the same effect, and he will have to pay the knas. Omar le Rav Yosef. So Rav Yosef responded to Rav Nachman with a support. Ihachi. If it's indeed as you are saying, meaning I want to support what you're saying, support your contention. Hainu de Tanira. So therefore we can understand, meaning the fact that we're not speaking about a Kiddushin explains the next brisa. So he's supporting Rav Nachman's interpretation. Hainu de Tanina, moher yumharena loyle isha. This as well is a pasuk by the Mafata, and the brisa explains. The pasuk is telling us that if the Mafata wants to, stay on with her as husband and wife, they have to do kiddushin. So that proves to us, that supports Rav Nachman, that in fact there was no kiddushin yet. If the original experience between the two was tantamount to kiddushin normally, why would we need a new kiddushin? So this proves our interpretation of the Parsha of Mafata. Indeed, there was no Masa Kiddushin, and in fact, it's not a Kasha on Ravasi, and we're all good. Amalei Abaye responds to Rav Yosef, no, not so quick. Perhaps Mafata does entail Kiddushin. And when the Brisa says you need a Tzricha Himenu Kiddushin, it just means you need the father's stamp of approval. You need him to come around and to approve it. So the Kiddushin that happened is sort of pending, awaiting father's approval. But if indeed father approves, then in fact we treat it as a proper Kiddushin, and they stay on as married. So bottom line is, perhaps there was Kiddushin, and your assumption that there wasn't isn't necessarily correct, but ultimately we thought we had a kasha on Ravasi, and we sort of answered it. Bottom line, we have a Ketana who was in Skalish without her father's approval. A father can certainly come around and reject it. Question, can she do the same? Rav says yes, Ravasi says no. We thought we had a kasha from Mafata, and we answered it. Continues the Mishnah. Ha'imar li'isha, hiskachali b'tmarazu. He takes a tmara, a date. Here, take this as kiddushin. He takes another date. Hiskachali b'zu. Here, take this one as well. He gives her, 10 dates. Im yesh ba'achas mehen shavapruta mekudeshes. V'im laveni mekudeshes. Being that he separated them. He said, "Iskachali bezu, iskachali betmarazu." He made a separate expression of kiddushin, one per item. The only way it's going to work, you can't combine them. You have to evaluate each single item, and see whether it has the required value, the minimum shavapruta value, and then we have a kiddushin. So any one of these 10 items can work, but you can't combine. Suppose he did combine it. He said, look, here, take this one and that one, that. Bazu, bazu, bazu. Then you can tally them up. If they total a shavar pruta, you're good. Im yesh shavar pruta a big kulan mekudeshes. Vim lav enim kudeshes. So, case 1 involves separate keddushins, one per item. One of those items have to be worth a shavar pruta. You can't combine. Case 2 involves combining the items. You can tally them up. As long as they total a shavar pruta, you're good. Concludes the Mishnah. Suppose she wasn't waiting around, she was eating them one by one as she was being handed the fruit. In this case, we say it doesn't work unless at least one of those fruits was worth a shavar pruta. And the Gemara will explain exactly, is this scenario an extension of case 1 or case 2? The Gemara will discuss. So case 1, separate keddushins, because he says skachili bezu. Case B involves a combined ma'aseh keddushin. All these are going to be used for the keddushin. Go figure whether you find a pruta amongst them. Now, in order to separate them, the Mishnah clearly phrases them separately. Skachili bezu, and that's needed to make them separate. Otherwise, if it wasn't so expressive, then you would just combine them. Man tana iskachi. Who requires such extensive expressions? So, suppose he would have just said bezu, it's not considered separate. Amar Rab Shimon, that's a famous Rab Shimon. We had this a couple of days ago. Mesechas Shvuos, when the fellow is confronted by many individuals who are claiming, some sort of monetary claims against him, and he denies them all. And then he admits he has to bring a korban shavua. One korban for all? Is it one single denial, or are they separate denials? So Reb Shimon says, in order to separate them, consider them separate denials, you have to actually say shvua. To you, shvua, I don't owe you. Shvua, I don't owe you a nickel. Shvua, I don't owe you a dollar. You have to actually say shvua per person, otherwise they're not separate. Likewise now, Mishnah, to separate them, you have to say skachli b'tmarazu. Otherwise, you can combine them as one. Bezu. Im yesh bekulan, then you combine them, right? Kulam shavar pruta. V'chulu is going on the conclusion of the Mishnah. Case where she was taking the tamara and she was eating them as he was handing them to her. The Mishnah says the only way it's going to work is if there's a shavar pruta in one of them. So any one of them has a shavar pruta, you're good to go. Now, how exactly did he hand them? Is this going back to case 1, where there were separate keddushins, or case 2, where there was a combined keddushin? Ahaya, Ilay Ma'aresh is going on the first part of the Mishnah. It's not going to work, because why discuss her eating the dates? Afilu manachas nami, even if she's putting them aside and saving them, you have the same requirement. You need to find a pruta in one item. It needs to be one tamara on its own worth a pruta. You know why? Because he clearly articulated that there are separate ma'aseh kedushin, separate entities. So why discuss eating? Why is that relevant? Ela as-seif. It's going on case B. It was a combined experience. All 10 dates are being given as a keddushin, as one single keddushin. So, if she's just putting them aside, so then you can tally them up at the end. Okay, did you get a total of a pruta? You're good. But in this case, where she's eating them, so then you can no longer they no longer exist, right? Right, you can't combine them because she's taking them and consuming them one by one. The only way it works is if you discover that at least one of them, any one of them, was worth a shavar pruta, so she got what she needed. Asks the Gemara, okay, Ela safe. So it's going on that case. Vafilu b'kamaisa. So do you mean to say that even if, suppose she was being handed 10 tamares, right? 10 fruits. The first one was a pruta worth, and she had it, and then the second one, etc. Even then it would work, afilu b'kamaisa, even though it's no longer here. Now we have a problem because, as Rashi explains, let's see Rashi around 15 lines off the bottom. Vafilu b'kamaisa, vafilu harishayna oyashniya shavar pruta, aval b'she'ein ba'achroina shavar pruta m'kadeshes. Even if the first or second item was worth a pruta, even though later on we don't have a pruta per item, it works because of that first item which she already consumed. There's a problem with that. It's a milva. It's tantamount to a loan, because ultimately she owes him that money until the kedushin is concluded, until all 10 items are given. She really owes him. Right? She tentatively owes him that money. V'hamilvi, he says Rashi, given the Kiddushin lo nigmru. When did the Kiddushin conclude? When did the Masa Kiddushin finish? By item number 10. Asher tekablam kulam, right? At that point, she had already consumed that first date, which you're trying to use for Kiddushin. Because that was the only one worth a pruta, right? Before it became Kiddushin, which only happens later, at the time being, it was just like a loan. Now he wants to apply that loan for the current Kiddushin. That's a mulva. And we learned back on DAF. Vav Amid Beis, that you cannot be Mekadesh with a loan, because it's no longer tangible, it's not here. It's no longer considered kesef. Havi Zuhur Rishonim Mulva Gabah. That's the kasha. How does it work? Continues the Gemara. Omar Rabbi Yochanan. We're frustrated. Harei Shulchan. Look, it's like a mashal. There's a Shulchan Aruch. You have a table here. Very basar. There's meat to eat. Very sakin. There's a knife to cut. There's no mouth to eat. We're stuck. We have a Mishnah here with halachas. We can't figure it out. Says the Gemara. Rav Shmuel. They came up with a solution. Amri Tavai. They both explain like this. What's your question? Milva? Okay. Lo'ilam Aresha. This halacha of Eichelas Rishona is going back on case 1 of the Mishnah, where he differentiated. He separated. Look, here's your tomorrow for Kiddushin. Here's this tomorrow for Kiddushin, etc., etc. In which case, you don't need to wait until the 10th one is handed to her. It's not a collective experience. Each one is a separate Masa Kiddushin by its own right. So as long as any one of them is worth a pruta, you're good, right? But the question was, we already had this. The Gemara already suggested it's going on the ratio. The problem was, why mention Eichelas? Why is that relevant? Even if she puts it aside, the same halacha will apply. The Chiddush is, we're trying to add a new twist. Needless to say, it goes without saying, meaning like this. It goes without saying that if she places the date beside her, she doesn't eat it. Of course it works. So if the item is worth a pruta, you're good, otherwise not. So that's understood. The chiddush is even if she's eating it, she's enjoying it. Maybe over there, you can go with less. Since she has immediate benefit and she's really enjoying it, so perhaps she's willing to give herself over for less than a pruta. Kamashwan, the chiddush is no. The rules don't change. You need an item which is a shavar pruta. Okay, so again we had the last clause of the Mishnah where she's eating the dates. It needs to be worth a pruta. The question was, what's it going back on? Case 1 of the Mishnah where there are separate Kiddushins, or case 2 where it's a combined system. Rabbi Yehuda was stuck. Rabbi Shmuel answered that it's going on case 1. Rabbi Ami Amar, no, it's going on case 2. La'ilam as-seifa, where there was that combined experience. Umay ad, and the question was, how could you apply the first date, which was worth a pruta, if that date had already been consumed? It's money that she sort of owes him back. You can't apply that credit to the Kiddushin. It's a milva. When we say one of them is worth a pruta, it doesn't mean the first one. It means that the last and final item, which is basically the culmination of the Masa Kiddushin, it concludes the whole procedure. Now the Kiddushin takes effect. If this item happens to be worth shavar pruta, you're in luck, because this item is still here. It still exists before she consumes it, and it's a shavar pruta. So, despite the fact that the previous 9 were not relevant, either because they were not a shavar pruta or because it was a milva, as long as the final one that you're giving her, which is the conclusion of the Masa Kiddushin, is worth the proper worth, you're good to go. So basically, we can conclude 3 conclusions from Rav Ami's response here. First of all, Shema Mina Mekadesh b'milva en Mekadeshes. Well, you can't use milva money because Rav Ami was obviously concerned with that kasha, and that's how he had to come back and answer it. So apparently, the halacha holds true. Number 1. Number 2, Ushma Mina Mekadesh b'milva upruta Da'ata pruta. Suppose he approaches an isha, says, look, you owe me money. I want to use that for Kiddushin, and here, take another pruta. It works, despite the fact that he mixed in something which doesn't work. As long as, there is a pruta here, the focus is on that, and it works. Same thing by our Mishnah, where there were previous items that were given, that were already consumed, that count and are considered like a milva. We ignore those, and we focus on the item being given currently, which is a proper pruta. That's number 2. Number 3, Ushmami, no, listen to this. Mois ba'alma chayzrim. Typically, if money is given to an isha for the sake of Kiddushin, which proved to be unsuccessful, suppose he was Mekadesh his sister, a relative, so the Kiddushin was not successful, what happens to that money? So actually, this is coming up in a minute in the Gemara, Machlekes Rav and Shmuel. Is the money considered like a loan, money that she owes him back, or is it like a matana? We'll see in a minute. In any case, it's clear from our sugya, from our Gemara, from our give and take, where we considered the original, the initial items as a milva, right? That was the premise that we were working with. Indicates to us that in this type of situation, where money was given for Kiddushin, but the Kiddushin did not really pan out, that money is considered owed back to the man, and therefore it had a status, is considered like a milva. Because otherwise, explains Rashi, if typically money in this type of circumstance is considered like a gift, then you wouldn't have a problem of milva in our Mishnah. Because look, he was giving her one tomorrow, another tomorrow, followed by another one, etc. So even if she was eating it, it wasn't a milva, it was just sort of being added up. He was giving it to her one at a time. And as soon as he's finished giving her all the fruit, it's all applied for Kiddushin. So bottom line is, it's clear that we're assuming Mo'is Ba'al Machayzrim, the initial money, so money that did not prove to be Kiddushin money, such as over here, where the initial money is not yet a Kiddushin, that's considered money owed back to him, and therefore has the status of a milva, hence our concern. Okay, on the topic of Mo'is Ba'al Machayzrim, Itmar, we have a Machlekes. HaMakadosh Achoysoi, a fellow is Makadesh's sister. Rav Amar Mo'is Chayzrim, Shmuel Amar Mo'is Matan. According to Rav, money goes right back to him. According to Shmuel, it's considered a gift. She keeps it. Why? Rav Amar Mo'is Chayzrim goes back to him. Adam Yedeya, She'en Kiddushin, Toifsin Ba'achoyse. Everybody knows. You can't apply Kiddushin to her sister. V'gamar v'nasan l'shem pikaden. When he gave it to her, what did he have in mind? To deposit the money with her, so that she looks after it. Why didn't he explain it? He should have said so. He figures maybe she'll hesitate to take responsibility, so he sort of, like smooth talked her into keeping it here. It's Kiddushin money. She takes it, too late. But after all, it's his money, and she owes it back. Shmuel Savar Mo'is Matana. According to Shmuel, no, it's a gift. She does not have to return that money. Why? Adam Yadeya She'en Kiddushin Toifsin Ba'achoyse. Everybody knows Kiddushin doesn't apply to a sister. V'gamar v'nasan l'shem matana. He gave it as a gift. V'neima lo l'shem matana. Why didn't he say so? Savar, he figures ksifala milsa. Perhaps it's uncomfortable for her to accept gifts, so he sort of packaged it like this, but really he meant it as a gift. So bottom line, Mekadesh Achoyse, Rav says, money returned to sender. According to Shmuel, it's a gift, which need not be returned. Masiv Ravina, have a kasha on Shmuel. Hamafresh Chalose Kemach. A fellow was preparing to make a dough. He has his flour in his basin. At that point, at that early, premature stage, he decides to separate the challah portion, which typically is separated from dough. As the pasuk says, "Reishes arisoy seichem." You got to separate a part of it. Don't give it to the kohen. Well, he did it a bit earlier. He jumped the gun and he was mafresh it in its flour form, which of course doesn't work. Einay challah. It's not legally considered challah. V'gezel bi'ad kohen. If the kohen keeps it, he's stealing. He has to give it back to the owner to redo the challah once it's dough. Asks the Gemara according to Shmuel, why does the kohen have to return the item? V'amay gezel bi'ad kohen. Neima, let us just say like this. It's the same, very similar to Kiddushin with Achoisei. Adam Yodeya. She'em Narfishim Chala Kemach. Everybody knows the very basic premise that you can't separate challah from the flour. It's right. V'nas lo shem matana. And when he gave flour to the kohen, v'nas lo shem matana, he gave it as a matana, just like Kiddushin la'achoisei. That was his way of giving him a gift. Here, take some challah. He really meant it as a gift. So why does the kohen have to return the item? Answer is, Shani Has, you're right. Legally speaking, he doesn't have to. The Rabbanan were concerned that it might cause confusion and pitfall. Shani Hasam Denafik Churba Mina. It can bring destruction. What does that mean? It can cause people to make a mistake. If the kohen holds on to that flour, he might think. He might be fooled into thinking that it really has a status of challah, and therefore, it can be eaten right away by the kohen. It's not like dough which was still tevel, awaiting the separation of challah from it. This is already challah, right? Challah in itself is edible for the kohen. So let's say he takes this flour. Zimnan de islay l'kohen. Imagine the kohen has a batter. He's preparing his own batter. Pachis mechamish revaim, which has less than the required amount for chiv of challah, less than 5/4 of a kav of kemach of flour, which is less than the minimum shear for challah is a batter which contains 5/4 of a kav. So he has less than that. V'hai alish leibadi adad, and he throws in this flour that he got from the Yisrael, which he thinks is challah. He mixes it into his batter, which now accumulates the total needed for separation of challah. But he thinks that there's no chiv of challah. You see, even a kohen has to separate challah from his batter. It's a chiddush. A kohen cannot eat tevel. He has to separate the challah, and then he eats the challah. But in this case, he figures there's no chiv of challah. It's exempt because it never had the shear. Even though right now it totals the shear, but remember, part of that is coming from the flour which I received from the Yisrael, which I'm assuming is already exempted. It's already challah in itself. So he's mistakenly thinking, right? He's thinking that his batter is now exempt from challah because savar in the takna isasa, it's mesukan. It doesn't need to be tended to. And it's going to be a big problem. He's going to have it as tevel. He's going to eat it without addressing the chi of challah. So in order to circumvent this concern and this confusion, we say, look, Mr. Kohen, return the flour to the Yisrael to avoid any issues. But halachically speaking, of course, the flour should belong to the Kohen. It was given as a matana in accordance with Shmuel's precept. Asks the Gemara, why are we at all concerned about Kohen making mistakes? You've just told me that everybody on the street knows that you can't separate flour as challah. Ha'amr's adam yedei. You just told me it's a commonly known concept. Adam yedei she'em afrishim challah kemach. Answers the Gemara, yedei ve'eni yedei. Selective knowledge. He understands somewhat. He knows yedei she'em afrishim challah kemach. Perhaps he knows the basic halacha. You can't separate flour as challah. But he's not sure why. Something he doesn't know. The savar, he figures, the kohen is thinking, Tamayu mai, why can't he do so? Mishum tircha the kohen, because it makes it difficult for the kohen. The Torah wants, the kohen to get dough and not just raw flour that he has to tend to and mix. So it's about helping the kohen. V'tircha the kohen, achilta. He says, look, if it's a question of my burden, I'm okay. I'm good with it. I'm moichel it. So if we allow him to keep the flour, he'll mistakenly think that it's valid challah, and he'll mix it into his dough and bring about a michshel. And therefore we say, look, strictly speaking, you can keep it, but we require you to return it to avoid confusion. Asks the Gemara, so if the kohen legally owns that flour, it's just a matter of avoiding confusion, why does he have to return it? Let's apply a different solution. But Tehavi Truma, let's consider the flour that he got as proper, truma, as challah. The Chacham should stipulate, look, it's yours, but in order to eat it, you have to separate challah from this thing. Okay? Basically, they're saying, don't mix it into your batter. You have to still tend to it and address its chi of challah. Treat it like tevel. So that will offer a solution to this problem. He's not going to mix it into his batter before he takes care of it. So why does he have to give it back? Hold on to it and take care of it. Milay Tanam, we have a similar halacha elsewhere. Situation where a kohen received truma which was, iffy. He doesn't have to give it back. You don't have to cancel it. You have to tend to it. Suppose he took truma from fruit or whatever material, which was chayiv in truma, on something which was exempt. So from chayiv to ptur. He took from something which grew in a nook of a flower pot, which is perforated, which is sort of considered connected to the ground. Anything growing within it is really tevel. He took truma from that to exempt something which grew in an einay nook of an unperforated flower pot, disconnected from the ground, which is really not chayiv in truma min haTorah. So it's not really a proper truma, because this is chayiv and this is pater. We say, nevertheless, the truma stands. We don't cancel the truma status. Truma or maser makam achar, but he can't. The kohen can't eat this truma, which was taken on behalf of something which doesn't need truma, because now this truma is not really truma. So he can keep it, but he has to take off truma from it, from itself, or from something else on it. Bottom line is, he has to address the tevel status. So the kohen keeps it, but he has to take care of it. Here as well, let the kohen keep the flour and take care of it. Well, big difference. Betray money, size. The difference between addressing an item growing in this pot as opposed to that pot, he understands, we'll explain to him, he'll accept from us. He'll comprehend the difference, he'll cooperate with us. He'll understand why it wasn't the proper truma, he'll follow instructions to retake the truma. Bechad mana letzois, as opposed to our challah over here, which was separated from one batch, same kli. It's not like you took from one kli on the other. We can easily explain to him what happened. The flour was taken out of this batch. Problem is, it was still in its flour state. That was the issue. So the kohen won't necessarily cooperate with us. Once we allow him to keep it, he'll assume it's good, and we'll move on. He won't appreciate, its deficiency. Okay? So therefore, it's not a solution. The only way to ensure proper procedure is requiring the kohen to return the flour to the Yisrael. Another approach can be, Lo'ilam kohen meitzah size. Truly speaking, kohanim mazrizim, they're chachamim, they're ksherim, they're conscientious and meticulous and halachas, they're learned fellows. There's no issue with them. We're not concerned that he's going to mess it up. The issue is the owner, the Yisrael who gave him the challah. If we allow the kohen to keep it, hold on to that flour, the Yisrael will assume that what he did was proper procedure, and he'll go ahead and consume the rest of his flour, the rest of his batter, assuming challah has already been separated, which in fact wasn't. Because our Baal Abayis issues with the owner, he'll figure that his batter had been addressed. And eat it as tevel, meaning he won't readdress it properly. Really? Everybody knows. You just told me it's a well-known concept that you can't separate challah and flour form. So allowing the kohen to hold on to it won't necessarily create confusion by the owner. Answers the Gemara the same as before. People have selective recognition. He understands, but not all the way. Sure, he knows that challah is meant to be separated as dough, not as flour. But he doesn't necessarily appreciate why. The savar, he figures tamamai. The reason is mishum tircha the kohen. We don't want to burden the kohen. Tircha the kohen, but the kohen, look, he's happy with it. He's he's happy with it. So why not just move on? So the only way to ensure due process is to have the kohen return the flour to the Yisrael, which now makes him cognizant and fully aware that his challah was worthless and he has to redo it properly. Asks the Gemara, why require the kohen to return? Let's consider the challah truma, proper challah, and have the owner, the Yisrael, redo it. We should stipulate, look, you separate challah as dough, okay, kohen keeps it, but the Yisrael has to redo it. This will ensure due process. Don't we have the similar halacha in the Mishnah? This time he took truma from something which grew in a detached flower pot, and he's taking truma for something that grew in a properly attached flower pot, a perforated otzitz nakov. So he's basically taking from something which is exempt on something which is chayiv. We say it's truma. It works. V'yachsav Yisrael has to redo it. So why can't we do the same by us? Keep the flour and let the Yisrael redo it. Ha'okimna, we have already just explained this before. He won't cooperate, he won't understand, he won't appreciate it, he won't go along with it. Betray money, tzayis. It's different than over there where it's two separate kelim. He understands, look, the difference between this pot and that pot. He'll appreciate it, he'll understand, he'll cooperate. Bechad monel tzayis, but a flour which was taken out of the same batter as the rest of the flour, he's not going to understand why he has to redo it. Unless it's returned to him and now he appreciates that it was unsuccessful, he'll redo it. V'lo tzayis, really from the same item, he's not going to listen. But Tanan, we have a similar halacha. Hatoyrem kishus v'nimtza mara. A fellow did truma from, his whatever squash or something. He took a squash and it turns out to be spoiled. Avatiach v'nimtza saruach. He takes a melon or part of a melon, turns out to be spoiled. Truma v'yachzor yitrayim. We say it's truma, but he redoes it. Apparently, requiring a redo addresses all concerns. Big difference, says the Gemara. Shani Hasam. There it's different. The Midayraisa Truma Ma'ali. You see, what was wrong in that case? It was spoiled. It was rotten. It was bitter. Inedible, right? Or maybe somewhat edible. But it wasn't, ideal Truma, which is meant to be from the best quality. Minat Torah, it works. So, better hold on to it and let him do it again. Why? And explains Rashi. Because if you require the kohen to return it to him, the Yisrael might mistakenly mix it back with his stuff, not realizing that it's really truma. That's on the one hand. On the other hand, even at the worst case scenario, he's not going to cooperate and redo it. He did his truma. He was yaitse. Because minat Torah it works. Mid Rabbi Loi, Dam Rabbi Loi, minay l'Torah, minat ra ala yafe, truma. How do we know that if one takes something of poor quality and uses it as truma on good quality stuff, it works. You're not supposed to do it, but it works. Shenemar. If you want to avoid violating chet, take the best. Take the best of your product. So the best is the best. That's the way you should be doing it. But otherwise, it still works because in Einay Kaddish, suppose he takes poor quality stuff. If it doesn't work, then why does the Mishnah, the pasuk indicate that he's doing an aver nesius chet lama? How's he violating an Isra if it never really took off? Apparently, even Ra ala Yafa is really truma. Mikan l'Torah, we learn from here, if a person separates mina Ra ala Yafa, takes poor quality stuff, as truma on good quality stuff, shat truma say truma that it works, so therefore there we leave it, we tell you to redo it, but let the kohen keep what he got, as opposed to our case. We require the kohen to return the flour, lest the owner think that he's done with the process and no longer has to address his batter, take it back, redo it, and give him proper dough. Okay, so in summation, what did we learn today? We started with a Iktana, who's in Skalish without her father is okay. Rav says, father can reject, she can reject. According to Ravasi, only father, but she, it's too late for her. We proceeded with the Mishnah. Case 1 involved, here, take this tomorrow for Kiddushin. Take this tomorrow for Kiddushin. Separate procedures. At least one of them has to be with a Shavar Putu. You can't combine, as opposed to the next case in the Mishnah, where he sort of combined it in one package. As long as they total a Shavar Putu, you're good. We concluded with a case where she was consuming the Tamara as she was taking it, one at a time. If any of them had a Shavar Putu, it works. We had one shot that it's going on the first case. We had another shot going on the second case in the Mishnah. Then we proceeded with Mekadesh Achoise. Rav says money is considered a milva. And Shmuel says Mois is matan. He wanted to give her a gift, and this was his way of sort of packaging it to avoid uncomfortability. And we had a kasha from a case of chala, which was properly answered. All the best to you, and Hatzlacha Rabbah.